Joining us now is Roger Stone, a lifetime friend of Donald Trump who says Trump made a mistake in Syria. Roger Stone, line 10, welcome to the program.
Dr. Savage, delighted to be here.
Well, how many years have you known the president as a friend?
We have been friends for 40 years. I have worked on and off for him for about 30 years. He is in a positive sense, an extraordinarily stubborn person, very much like Ronald Reagan. When he sets his mind to something, he'll make it happen. Tariffs, for example. But I think it's important to understand that since the moment of his improbable election, in which, in all honesty, your commentary played a major role, the deep staters around him, the permanent government in place, including members of his own White House staff and his policy advisors, have done everything possible to dilute, delay, water down, sidetrack, or kill all of the major initiatives on which he was elected. They wanted him to sign climate change. He said no. They wanted him to join TPP. He said no. They wanted him to scale back the tax cuts, and he said no. Well, that's why the economy is growing at 3%. When it comes
so Roger, we both agree that he's doing some great stuff, but the thing that had me call you this morning, and you so kindly agreed to come on the show, is that there are not too many people other than you and I and Alex Jones and maybe one or two others who actually say that the Syria strike was a mistake as a result of neocons whispering in his ear. Would you elaborate on that if you believe that to be true?
Look, how many times can the permanent government in place play the same dirty trick? It was only months ago that we launched a surgical strike on an air base in Syria in retaliation for reported chemical attacks that we still cannot prove were the act of the Assad government. General Mattis now admits that we do not have evidence of that. God. So it's entirely possible that was a false flag. We know of the White House Chief of Staff showing the president ghastly photos of children who'd been gassed. It was a campaign. He's a father. He has a heart. And I think he ordered an action there that ended up having a greater political statement than ever really changing the complexion of what's happening in Syria.
Roger, I want to go back to something that's very important because you're an insider. I am not. I don't know Donald Trump for 40 years. I know that I backed him for a number of reasons, mainly because I thought, A, he was the only one who could beat Hillary, which is true. And I also felt that his positions were identical to mine on borders, language, and culture, to summarize them in 3 words. And so I worked around the clock to get him elected. Does he understand that there are those in the media who are now pretending to be his greatest bootlicking friends, that they attacked him for a year straight before he won? Does he remember that?
In some instances, he does. In other instances, he doesn't. I think he now broadens it, because now, to him, that's who he's talking about when he says fake news. That said, when you consider the role of alternative media in his election, the Internet, this show, Alex Jones, InfoWars, Daily Caller, Breitbart, Town Hall, Gateway Pundit, Zero Hedge, all these terrific alternative, conservative, right-thinking sites, he never gives interviews to them. They don't have White House press credentials in most cases, yet he's giving his maiden interview as president to Leslie Stahl of CBS. Talk about yesterday.
Yeah. So look, Hope Hicks is gone, and she was a young person, maybe didn't have the skills that she needed for that job. Without knocking her, I mean, let's face it, who's doing the job now? Who's his communication director?
Donald Trump is his communications director. Donald Trump decides who's going to interview with and who he isn't. He really is a control freak when it comes to control of his image. He's his own writer. He's his own wordsmith. He is his own phrase maker. He dictated at the top of his lungs the copy for all of his television commercials. And, you know, he understands the public relations media cycle. He knows.
Roger, again, I want to reiterate to people who they should know more about you. You know Donald Trump for 40 years as his confidant and friend. Would you say you're still on his good side?
Oh, I think there's no doubt about it. We are very good friends, and I have been a loyal supporter of his administration. I think he's done some miraculous things. Economic growth at 3%, on the verge of a peace deal in Korea. But this is a mistake. The president has too high a institutional regard for the military. I think he gives them the benefit of honesty in their assessments. I don't think he understands the way our military was politicized under Barack Obama, where globalists and leftists in the ranks were promoted, and those known to have Republican or more conservative sympathies were retired.
Wow.
Unfortunately, our military, like our intelligence services, have become completely politicized. They're run by a political agenda.
Roger Stone, I want to bring up a name. I call him the Walrus out of a lack of affection for him as a human being. It seems to me that it was rather convenient that the Walrus started his job as National Security Advisor on that Monday, while just 2 days before there was a very convenient chemical attack that he used as a pretext to egg the president on to the missile strike. Do you know the Walrus at all?
I know John Bolton very well. I'm going to take a slightly different view of him than you. He's not a close friend of mine. I'm not claiming that he is. I met him when Ronald Reagan was president. He was a very key thinker in the whole peace through strength Reagan doctrine that was far different than the neocon interventionism that the Bushes then gave us. This is a Caspar Weinberger school of not getting entangled abroad. And the whole is based on the notion that if you're extraordinarily strong, people won't pick on you. It's only when you get weak that they start to be. Bolton then went to work for the Bushes. He's ruthlessly efficient, he's extraordinarily capable, and he's very smart. And now he's working for Donald Trump. I do not actually think he's an ideologue. I think he is an operative, a hitman, an executor. The Bushes said, hey, John, we need a phony Iraq war. See what you can go whip up, will you? And he did. So I would not presuppose that he is the orchestrator of this. He also has to know that given his Bush and neocon credentials, he's going to be watched very carefully. I also say this to you, Michael. How could anybody be worse than H.R. McMaster?
Well, Bolton is in there, and what worries me is that you said a few things right now that I'll remember a very long time. You triggered me when you said Bush, because I believe that the signaling we have gotten in the last number of days indicates that signals are being sent to the world and to the internal apparatus in this government and everywhere else that the Bushes are now running the country again.
I could not. In
some regard, especially with regard to foreign policy, it looked to me like, outside, Roger, again, you're the insider. I'm only an outsider who looks in from the outside. It looked to me like there was signaling saying the Bushes are now in control again.
That's a very, very astute observation. It explains the announcement of the pardoning of Scooter Libby. If the president pardoned a guy for spreading lies to get us into war, at the same time, the guys around him today are spreading lies in order to get us into war. It's extraordinary. And
yes, but we went to war in Iraq based on the false statement, or let's say fake evidence, that there were weapons of mass destruction. And the same team that did that seems to have provided the president with photographs of a gas attack that may or may not actually have occurred, or if it did occur, we don't know who did it.
Remember this, that the president tweeted 10 days ago, I think it's time to start pulling our troops out of Syria.
Right.
That's when the deep state boys hit the panic button. Quick, you guys better hook up a gas attack. That worked last time. I mean,
Roger, why did they want us to stay in Syria? Is it, as I suspect, they want to divide Syria into at least four new states?
Look, on one hand, you have Assad financing Hezbollah, financing Hamas, propped up by the Russians. He's a bad guy. On the other side, you have ISIS and 1,000 other subsets of ISIS that are more fanatical than the original, propped up by the Saudis. By the way, they're not friends of ours either. Is it worth an American dollar or a drop of American blood? I don't see our inherent national interest here. I just don't see it.
Neither do I. You see, that's the issue. National interest. And Trump ran as a man of peace. I wrote about that in Trump's War, Mr. Stone. I said one of the reasons I backed him is he's going to get us out of foreign entanglements. She wanted to get us into them. He ran as a peace candidate, not as a war candidate. He ran as a non-interventionist. He ran as a nationalist. Those are the reasons I backed Mr. Trump. And yet I wake up and say, wait a minute, this is the opposite of what we all thought we were going to get. And yet on so many other levels, we're doing so great in this country. I mean, other than the constant drama brought about by the vermin in the media and by Mueller's relentless, heartless persecution of the president. When is that going to ever end?
This is a mistake to underestimate the deep enmity of the two-party duopoly that's run this country into the ground. The establishment of the Republican and Democratic parties have cultural disdain for Donald Trump, and because he's not of the political class. And they have a deep resolve to remove him no matter what. I mean, it is outrageous that Michael Cohen is being put under surveillance, and that they break into his locker, his office for records, and this is an act of the Trump Justice Department. The Trump Justice Department is investigating, everybody who works for Donald Trump. This makes no sense. Rosenstein has got his own legal culpability in Uranium One. Hard jail time, provable crime, quite easy, I think. I wrote a long piece about it for the Daily Caller, and make the case that Uranium One involves Mueller, Comey, McCabe, and Rosenstein. The four.
Let's take a pause. Can you stay with us another few minutes after the break and take calls from the listeners?
Be my honor.
Okay, listen, folks, we're talking to someone who knows what he's talking about. You hear a lot of commentary, but you don't know what to believe. I don't blame you. Roger Stone is a loyalist to President Trump. He's known him for 40 years. If you have a quick question, you could call me at 855-400-7282, and maybe we'll get you up there. 855-400-7282 to speak with Michael Savage and Roger Stone. One shot, 800. No, that's not the number. What is my number? Who remembers all these numbers? 855-400-7282. We go back to a man who's been a personal friend and advisor to President Trump for over 40 years, still totally supporting him, and yet disagrees on the neocon-inspired missile strike in Syria. Roger Stone, welcome back to the Savage Nation.
Good to be here.
Well, I tell you, I'm flooded with calls, and I want to take one right now. Pete on WDRC. Pete, fire away, make it quick. No, see, I love this. It's like quick on the draw, and the other one already went to sleep. KLIF, Stacy, line 2. Go ahead, you're on the Savage Nation.
Hi, thanks for taking my call. Question is why Mr. Stone thinks this country continues to have this incestuous relationship with Saudi Arabia.
All right, Mr. Stone, any answer to that?
Yes. Look, I worked in Washington as a lobbyist in the Bush years. The Saudis have a deep understanding of the American political system, and they have vast sums of money to grease palms with. Whether it's charitable, whether it's tax-free, whether it's business investment.
Well, no, we understand how they get the access, but I think the lady is asking something different, and I think you got that as well, which is, are they really our friends, and are they to be trusted?
No, absolutely not. They talk out of both sides of their mouth. Look, they finance Wahhabism, the most virulent and violent sect of Islam, and then at the same time, they tell us that they're people of peace.
Yeah. And then they hang their friends upside down in the Four Seasons Hotel and beat them around the ankles, and then they steal their money. Great people. Roger Stone, I want to thank you for joining us on the Savage Nation. If you have the fortitude and desire to take additional calls, we can call you back after the top of the hour. The rest of you be here because we're going to talk about Gorsuch, Supreme Liberal, San Francisco horror stories, and how Trump made a mistake in Syria.
Join the Savage Nation. Call now, 855-400-SAVAGE, 855-400-7282. Savage.
Thank you for listening to the show on Really Big Something Channel.